Hi, today we're checking out Measure Better. It's a utility add-on that allows you to instantly measure multiple objects or edges, add 3D measurements to your scene, quickly show or hide all of your measurements, and print them to a text file. So let's take a look. After you install it, you'll see a new side panel called Tape, short for measuring tape. And this is your panel. So the first thing that you can do is quickly select any object or multiple objects and see their exact dimensions. So you can see the cube is 24 by 24 by 24 and the text dimensions are what they are. And this is unit respective, so if you switch from inches to feet, you should see that value change. If you change their scale in real time, you should see their value change scale in real time. And it also supports metric. It supports meters, centimeters, millimeters, feet, and inches. And this works for any number of selected objects. You can just quickly know exactly what their measurements are. The second thing that you can do is add these measurements to the scene as a 3D object. So you can click here and say add to scene. And now you're getting text objects with the measurements added along their axis. So here's the x-axis, 68.49 centimeters, the y, and then the z. You can also quickly show or hide all of your measurements. And this works for multiple selected objects as well as complex objects. So let's say that you have Suzanne here, and maybe you have a torus down here. You can select all three of these and say add to scene, and now they all get all of their measurements added. Pretty handy, and you can change the color as well. So if you want to step back and say, okay, maybe your cube was red, I'm just going to switch to material view, and maybe you want these guys to be black. You can say, okay, I want the text to be black, add to scene. There you go. Now the text is black. You can also include the suffix or not. So here we're saying 54.34 centimeters. If you don't want the suffix, you can just uncheck that, add to scene, and now you just get the raw value. It should always print correctly the suffix based on the unit that you're in. So if we switch back to imperial and we switch back to inches and we move Suzanne, we say add to scene, now you're seeing 21.39 respective to her inches measurement. Okay, I'm going to step back. I'm just going to delete some of this stuff here, and we'll go into edge mode. So that works for objects. It also works for edges. So any selected edges that you have, you'll always see their dimension. And as you scale up or down their edges, you should see them change. And you can do the same thing that you did with adding measurements, except it's going to add the measurements to the edge's midpoint. So if I click here, and it should keep the rotation. So yep, you see 27.62. There is a little bit of an oddity here, which is that it's always going to follow the normal direction, so it's going to sort of work its way around the cube. So some of these might seem backwards, but that's just because it wants you to look at it from this perspective based on the normal direction. There's no other than camera tracking it, so that it always faces the camera. There's no way to have it be in 3D space facing both directions without having both fonts. So we just said, okay, stick with the normal direction, and we can fix it on a need by need basis. But that also works with complex meshes. So Suzanne, she's got almost 1,000 edges in her, and we just added measurements for every single one of her edges to the midpoint of each edge, which is pretty cool. And if you delete Suzanne, now you'll see Suzanne made up of her measurements, which is kind of interesting. Cool. So we've covered object measurement and edge measurements. We've added the text to the scene. Show hide or show all just does exactly what it sounds like. If you have 3D text in your scene, it's just going to show hide or show all. And the way it does that is it adds all of your measurements to a collection called measurements, and then it just hides or shows that collection. The last thing that you can do is you can print your currently active measurements to a CSV. So if you have a bunch of objects in here, maybe these are wood panels or something, maybe you've designed a wooden desk and you want to send the cut measurements to a carpenter so he knows exactly the dimensions that he needs to cut. Let's say that you select all of your objects and these cubes are your cuts. If you want all of these values to be printed to a CSV, you can just select print selected to CSV. You can define where you want to put it, you can define where you want to put it, and when you hit print to CSV, will now open a Explorer window here, and you go to CSV, and there you go. There you see all of your cut dimensions, and you can send this to a spreadsheet, or you can send this to a carpenter, or you can do other useful things with it. It works as well for edges. It's not quite as useful for edges because edges don't have names, but this is a cool way if you have, if you've built something from woodcuts, you can get exactly your dimensions with the click of a button. That's it. It's just a measuring tool. I'm not in love with Blender's default measuring system. One other thing I should mention is you don't have to apply scale. This should pick up the accurate measurements regardless of if your scale has been applied or not, which is pretty nice. But yep, just a nice dynamic way of always knowing measurements, quickly adding them to your scene in intelligent placement, and then printing them to a CSV so you can send the data to somebody who needs to use it. I hope you enjoy it. It's a pretty useful add-on. Thanks for your time.